Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tiki Bar. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Gaughan. He is the Vice President of Business Development and Enablement at LotLinx. He also has his own his own coaching business, Gaughan Leadership Services. He is an Ironman. He is a cancer survivor. Dan, it's great to see you. How are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm good, Kevin, man. Thanks for having me on the show, and I'm excited to be here. Everything is good, man.
Good, good. I love to hear that. We always start with the same opening question. What did you want to be when you grow up? When you grew up?
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm still trying to grow up, man. But I just remember as a kid, I was always a big baseball guy. I got the Jim Palmer jersey in the background, Baltimore kid. But, I think I was always realistic. I didn't necessarily think I could be a baseball player. I wanted to be on the grounds crew for the Baltimore Orioles. I wanted to go out there and keep that field in shape so I could just be around the game. Just as a kid, that was always kind of a weird aspiration. But yeah, I was like, man, it would be cool to be
Interesting. So do you have a pristine yard if I looked out your window?
there.
It's like very, very well manicured?
No, I think I never really got it. I can't grow anything. I think I was more just like wanted to be the guy to put the chalk on the dirt, right?
There you
And
go.
raked up afterwards, and anything I could do to be around the game, man. I think that was really where my mind was something realistic to be around baseball.
Nice. No, that makes sense. I actually have a cousin who did that for the Milwaukee Brewers for a while. And it
Nice,
was great. You
yeah,
had to sit front row and
right.
there's always like the guy who falls under the tarp. We were always hoping that one day there'd be a little YouTube video, but it never
Right,
happened.
man. Too athletic to get caught under the tarp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he was crushing it. So then what ended up being the first job you ever had?
Man, first job I ever had, I worked at a frozen yogurt place. I did a lot of that stuff through high school, and then I did a lot of building houses and decks on the side for construction companies and that sort of thing through high school and college as well in the summers. And so I learned a lot, which was great. Kind of how to be handy. I also learned that if you have the right tools, it's pretty great how you can get things done. Tools make a lot of difference. But so I loved working with my hands, but I wasn't super talented with it. And so my first job out of college, I actually worked for Home Depot because that was kind of the field that I knew, and did that for a while, and then transitioned into the automotive space. Like within 6 months of graduating college, I started to work for Toyota corporately, which at what was Toyota Motor Credit Corp at the time, which is crazy, but it's now Toyota Financial Services.
Yeah, yeah. So all the way back when you're doing like carpentry work or working at the ice cream shop, any memorable days of like, oh, this is what it means to have a job?
Yes, yeah, I can remember. I was at the ice cream shop, and it was when those places was open till 11:30 or midnight, and I remember the manager that I had didn't want to have to be there past 9 o'clock, and so it was my first understanding of like when you become someone that's valued, how that can be good and can be bad, right? She was like, awesome, like Dan's responsible, he'll make sure things get done properly. I can bounce out of here, and he can close up the shop. And so I remember many times being there by myself until 12:30 at night, as a 17-year-old in high school, closing up the ice cream shop. But also remember, like, made me feel good that she trusted me at that age to take on that quote unquote responsibility.
And it all worked out. You closed the freezers. Nothing
Yeah,
melted.
man. Yeah. Ice cream never melted. And somehow people that showed up the next day were happy. So, never seemed to get in trouble.
Good for you. Good for you. So you get into carpentry, Home Depot, and then the auto industry. What is it like to come into the auto industry? It sounds like you came in through Toyota Financial Services. Can you like kind of just even dissect like what that is relevant to the rest of the industry?
Yeah, for sure. So, it's crazy. I'm a little bit older than most folks that are probably listening to this, but back then I sent out like 1,000 resumes via mail, right? Looking for a job. I had a degree in finance and economics, and I interviewed with Toyota Motor Credit. So at that time, Toyota Motor Credit Corp, which is now TFS, they were the lending institution, the captive bank for Toyota dealers, right? Toyota Lexus dealers. So my job there, when I started with them, I was a credit analyst along with a collections agent. So I was calling folks who we had financed their vehicles and they were not paying those vehicles on time. And then ultimately I was in charge of repossessing vehicles that we needed to get back, right? And so it was an interesting introduction into the automotive world, right? I dealt with dealers a little bit, communicated on why we bought the deals that we bought or rejected the deals that we rejected, or how to structure the deal differently so that we would accept the deal. So I started to learn how deals were structured within the dealership world and how the dealership world operated a little bit like on the surface. But I really started to figure out how to interact with customers, and not from a position that they want to be talking to you. People don't really want to hear from a collections agent, right? And I was in Baltimore and DC, so it was an interesting market and interesting time. But I learned a ton, and I did that job for just over a year before taking another role with Toyota.
So what is that? What is that like you're fresh out of college, got a nice degree, you're having to call people and say, hey, you're late, we need this payment. And then you're also organizing bringing the car back?
Right. Yeah. So we worked with independent contractors that actually physically picked the vehicles up, but we were trying to find the cars. At that point, if I was trying to reach you, Kevin, and I either reached you and you weren't willing to work with us, or you just were avoiding us. And there were times when people were just actually hiding their cars. They knew they weren't going to pay for them. So they were looking to drive them as long as they could without paying for them. It was my job to try to figure out where the car was using credit bureaus and activity elsewhere and that sort of thing. We try to hone in where your vehicle was, where it was parked, those sort of things, so that we could send the repo agent out to pick it up, because it is an asset, and that's we want to try to get it back and get as much as we could for it. And it was never the situation we wanted, though, right? Like most times when a car was being repossessed, it was not well taken care of, and the car wasn't worth what was owed on it, and so the bank, Toyota, was taking a loss on it. So it was not the solution that we wanted. We really wanted to work with people and try to get them on a payment program that worked for them, which I would say the vast majority of the time that's what we were able to do. I mean, most people, like, they don't intend to not pay, right? Things happen, life changes. And that's the other thing I think I started to learn was that, most of these folks didn't wake up one day and just decide to not pay for their car, right? Something happened to them that put them in a position that they couldn't. And again, at that time, at that age and that life experience, I don't think that really dawned on me until much later. And, I'm sure we'll get into my perspective on a lot of things has changed over the years. But back then it was a job. Hey, man, like, pay the bill. If you're not paying, I got to get the car back. And so it was kind of really how I looked at it. But interacting with customers in that format was very interesting.
Yeah, that is trial by fire. And it sounds like even from an early age, you were kind of understanding their position and sympathizing with them, which is obviously important in sales. And so after that role, did you then move into the dealership side, or what exactly was next?
No, I spent 13 years with Toyota corporately in a multitude of roles. So that was my first year. And then I took a job at the corporate headquarters, which was then in Southern California in Torrance. So I moved across the country and I was a national auditor. So that was also not an overly pleasant job. I spent my whole time flying all over the country auditing car dealerships to ensure that they were actually reporting cars sold that they had sold and not reporting cars sold fictitiously and getting incentive payments and allocation and that sort of things. Again, a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but also a lot of conversations where it was just done by error or, not really done to be malicious. It was just things happen. But that was really when I started to get to interact with car dealers on a regular basis. And I had a lot of fun, man. I mean, there's so many great people in this business. And it's a business that I think for a long time has been really misunderstood. A lot of bad reputation, a lot of jokes. You watch the movies, you can hear the jokes about car dealers and that sort of thing. But I met a lot of great people over my career. And so that was awesome. I was young, single, flying all over the country, doing audits, meeting people, and then moving on to the next one. And it was great. I got to see, I think I visited 38 states in less than a year doing that role. And I lived in Southern California on the beach. So a kid from Baltimore City moving out to Cali and living on the beach and flying all over the place. There were many times I was kind of like, man, how did I get here? Right? Like, this was pretty wild. And it was a lot of fun, learned a ton, and did that job for just about a year as well. And then met some folks at a meeting that worked at the regional office here in Baltimore. And they offered me a role back here at the office in Baltimore as a service and parts rep for Toyota. So in that role, I had somewhere between 15 and 20 dealers in a specific market that the office here covered. So we covered, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware, Virginia, West Virginia. So I called on pockets of dealers for about 6-7 years for service and parts for Toyota. And then again, that really started to learn more about the business. Right now I'm in stores every day, all day, and working with service managers and parts managers, and started to understand that process was really where my brain was, right? Like I like sales, but I'm really about the process and what impact does our process have on our team members and also our customers, and watching how car dealerships ran their business and going, man, like there's a better way to do this, right? You've got technicians at 100 yards away from the parts department walking multiple times a day to get parts that they need. Like the time that we're wasting while that technician is walking 100 yards to get parts and back, right? And stopping to have conversations along the way, right? How can we make that process more efficient for both the dealership and the customer, right? Because it's all time, right? And so learned a ton there, a lot of selling skills as well. Service advisor talks to 30, 40 people a day, right? And so there's, and a lot of times those people aren't happy, right? Their car's broke. And it's a Toyota. They don't expect their car to be broken, right? And so why is my car not operating the way it's supposed to be operating? So being able to handle customers and put them at ease, and then show them the value on what we're proposing that they need for their vehicle. I loved it. I think that's why the teaching, both my parents were teachers for a long time in public education. So that side of me, I think, really started to come out, that process and how to teach folks, better ways to communicate, and did that job for about 6 years, and then did a similar role, but just on the sales side for Toyota in the same markets. And so now I was interacting on the sales side, and the number of incredible men and women that kind of took me under their wing and just like, hey man, come spend a day with us and just watch what we do all day. Work the sales tower, sit in our sales meetings, watch how we interact with customers and team members. And it was amazing. Learned a ton. And then I had a dealer in Philly that I was calling on, Team Toyota in Langhorne. Paul Muller and his family sat me down one day and said, hey man, we'd love to have you join our team and come help us take these dealerships to the next level. And so that's when I transitioned into the retail side. So after about 13 years with Toyota.
Okay. I misinterpreted your profile. So that's when you transitioned into retail. Okay. So when you're going through and kind of learning all these different elements of sales and how the dealership is run, you mentioned you met a bunch of great people and saw a bunch of different things. Can you zoom into that a little bit more? Is there a particular story that you remember, or were there segments of the business that you weren't aware existed beforehand?
Yeah, I think that's the thing about the car business that's the most fascinating to me. Like when you really understand what goes into selling a car and servicing a car and keeping that customer for life. I mean, it just goes in so many different directions, right? I mean, from marketing, production, inventory, sales, service, retention, remarketing. I mean, like you touch so many different things. And so it takes so many different types of personalities and knowledge bases to make a dealership operation. And that's before you even talk about the fact that you got the OEM that's producing the car and all the things that go into that, right? And so, and that whole interaction between the manufacturer and the dealer, right? There's so much that goes into this business. And then you've got all the third-party vendors that I've worked for many of those, right? Since being in retail, right? And helping dealers along the way. But I would say there were definitely a handful. One of the folks was the general manager at the store that I ended up going to work for, Mike Marone, was just one of those guys that was just like, hey man, spend the day, sit through these meetings. And then he would ask me questions. Do you understand this? And why would it? I have no idea. Cool. Let me show you. And then what I loved about him was he wanted my perspective as a consumer. He's like, what do you think? What do you see when you walk through our store? I'm like, man, that stuff's outdated from 6 months ago. And you got people over here that, are not doing anything to show them. And they look like they're just wasting time. Right? The perception is that you're wasting. And so from a consumer standpoint, the idea of buying a car can be very daunting, and it's a long and a slow process a lot of times. And they don't understand that there's only 3 people in the dealership that can do certain roles. But when you see other people around the showroom doing nothing and you're sitting there waiting to go into the finance office, you're kind of like, well, what's taking so long, right? It's like being in a restaurant where there's nobody seated, but you're waiting for a table. Right? Like, why would I be waiting for a table when there's tables empty? Well, half our service staff didn't show up, right? That would be the reason why you don't have a table yet. Same thing in the dealership, right? There's only certain people that can do certain things because they are so highly either technical or legally regimented, right? And the finance process is very highly regimented through the state and federal governments. We got to follow processes, right? And so some of that takes time. But Mike Marone was one of those guys that just, he saw something in me, which, I appreciated, and he got value from me. And he was one of the very first people that started to show me, that every person that you come into contact with can bring value into your life in some way, shape, or form, man. You can, and sometimes it's learning what you don't want to do. And I don't want to behave that way. I don't want to handle a situation in that way, right? But he was a wonderful mentor. There was another guy at a Toyota store in Virginia, Bob Farlow, probably one of the best car people I've ever met in my life. And just one of those guys that everyone he interacted with wanted to go wherever he was going, man. Bob just had that way of making you want to run through a wall for him, and zero ego. I mean, the most humble. If he hears this and he hears me mention his name, he's going to be like, seriously, dude, why'd you call me out? Right. Like, but just a wonderful guy. Right. And I'm going to feel bad that I didn't name 15 other people, but there were just some interactions with those two guys individually that I vividly remember sitting in Bob Farlow's office at times, just learning about how he bought used cars and why he looked at things the way he did. Right. And why we structure deals the way we do, and those sort of things, and the processes that we run with our sales teams and that sort of thing. There's just so much that goes into the car business that when you have people that really know what they're doing, and they do it from a perspective of wanting to take care of the customer and wanting to take care of their teams, it's awesome.
And so then when you get into the retail side and you get into that for a while, what is a typical day like? Is there a typical day? Because you're running teams, there's all these different areas, you're trying to make sales. Like, what does it actually look like behind the scenes of what you're trying to accomplish in a given day?
I think that's the best and hardest part about being in, especially in a leadership position at a dealership, being a general sales manager or a general manager, is no day looks the same, which is awesome, right? Because every day you show up, you have a plan, but you also get punched in the face all day long. And so those plans change, but that's also what makes it exciting, right? Because every customer is different. Every team member, again, bigger store, more people to deal with, all that sort of thing. You got sales, service, parts, marketing, the accounting office, like it's a million people running around and different personalities and different perspectives. It's a challenge, but a typical day, for me at least, and early on, I will say, like, my very first day at Team Toyota, I got there and I'm like the first person in the building, and I log into the computer and I have literally no idea right? Like I've never worked in I have been around it, but I had never been the general sales manager of a car dealership before. And I remember I called Bob Farlow. I was like, cool, I'm here today. Like, now what do I do? And he was like, and he gave me some advice, and his whole thing was like, find out everyone that talked to your dealership yesterday, sent an internet lead, made a phone call, or came into the dealership and didn't buy a car. Why? Find out from your team why those people didn't buy a car from you, right? And so that was kind of like the process that I started to build on, was figuring out if people interact with a car dealer, it's really because they want to buy a car, right? Like, they're not coming by the dealership for the free popcorn, right? Like, they are there to purchase a vehicle. And if they didn't, odds are it was probably something we didn't do well. Right. And we maybe didn't ask the right questions, didn't really hear the answers, didn't provide the right level of service. And there are certainly times where we just didn't have the right car for them, or they didn't qualify, or whatever the case is. But most of the time, it's because both sides didn't do everything well. Right? Maybe the consumer didn't, communicate well with us, and we didn't ask the right questions, or we didn't listen, or whatever the case is. Right. So we really wanted to figure out, like, why did we not provide the service that we're there to provide, which is sell them a car, right? And then when you think about the service department, it's the same thing, right? We're there to provide a service. We want to keep their car in good condition and keep them as a customer, because if I can keep you as a service customer, I'm significantly more likely to sell you a car the next time and the next time and the next time, right? And so it really comes down to, as a leader in that organization, customer service all the way around. Like, I gotta treat my team well. I need to put them in position to be successful and understand the challenges that they have, and provide them ways to overcome some of the obstacles they run into. And then also, we want to make sure that all of our processes are driven around providing good service to our customers, right? And I think that's the thing I love the most about the car business, but bugs me the most about how people think about the car business. Right? Like, that is the mentality that the vast majority of people I've met in 30 years in the car business come to work every day. Like, I'm here to take care of my customers. And I think that gets lost on some people. I mean, it is a for-profit business, right? And we are here to run a business that's profitable, but really it is about customer service for us, because when you can retain that customer and treat them well, we know that relationship's going to yield results for us down the road. And so I think people just don't really get that. And some of the best people I've ever met in my life, man, are work in or own or run car dealerships. And they're just, for the most part, just regular people that just want to do a good job. So
I love that. I mean, that resonates with me too. I mean, I've been a salesman my whole life, and the stigma is not just in the auto industry, but it persists. And so it becomes an opportunity, right? If you can show that you really do care, it can put you in an advantage spot. So I love that story of the first day, because you're calling somebody, say, I just don't really know what to do. At some point it clicks for you, because you obviously had success with it. When did it click? Was there a moment where you felt like, all right, I'm humming, I know what I'm doing now?
and honestly, I think imposter syndrome is a very real thing. And I think I felt that way for a long time in that business, only because you're only as good as yesterday, right? I mean, it's sales, right? And so there is pressure. There's this mindset of, man, like today wasn't a good day, or we didn't achieve the goal today or this month. And, is there going to be a tomorrow? And that's a very real thing as well in any sales organization, right? And so that's why the rewards can be so high, because, the pressure is also high. I think when it clicked for me that I felt like I could do this and I could be good at it was my last day at that first dealership. I was there for 4.5 years, and I was leaving to, I was commuting a long way from home for that store. And so I made a decision to move to a different organization a little closer to home. And one of the sales managers that was on the team, I was the general sales manager, and like he was one of my floor managers, but he had been the general sales manager at that dealership previously, and had been there a long time, and just wanted to take a smaller role and not have so much of a leadership role. And he walked me out to my car, and he said, man, he's like, one of the things that I loved about working with you was that every day when I got here, I knew exactly what to expect. I knew if the meeting that we had with you was not pleasant, I already knew it wasn't going to be pleasant, because we knew what we were supposed to do and we didn't do it. And so that was that. I think that was one of the more impactful conversations as well. When I look back on it, him sitting there and saying to me, like, hey man, like, you set very clear expectations. And we all knew when we walked in, if we didn't meet those expectations, there were going to be ramifications, right? And it wasn't like I'm not a yeller, screamer, that kind of stuff. I've gotten even better at that than I was. I think I was probably a little harder on people back then than I would have liked to have been. But he was like, you have a very clear vision and plan of where we were going to go, and you were going to hold us accountable to that. And so it wasn't like every day, like, oh man, I don't know what to expect. I knew what I was going to get when I walked in. And right or wrong, you came at it from a perspective of wanting us to be successful. And so I think I wish I could go back at times and redo the way I handled a lot of situations. I think most of us in life, and not just professionally, just in life in general, would love to have some scenarios back. But for me, that was a really, really meaningful conversation that I've held on to for a long time. I mean, that's you're going back years. And I can just remember walking out to my car with him and having that conversation. So that's when it kind of clicked for me. Okay, man, here's somebody that's been doing this for a long time, and wasn't like, man, hey, Mac, I'm so glad to see that dude go, because he doesn't have a clue, right? Like, he was like, man, it's been good working with you, because we were going in the right direction and we knew what to expect. So, but I think that's the other part of it, is that business is hard. I mean, it's leadership in general. One of the things we teach in the leadership coaching business, it's hard, because you're leading other people and you're always on display. And it's a very real responsibility when you look at it candidly, like to have the opportunity to lead other people. It's an opportunity to improve their lives and the lives of their family. And that's a responsibility that needs to be taken seriously. And again, I was young. I mean, that's, and the car business is tough. It's awesome, but it's tough work. Right. It's a lot of hours, a typical day, as a GM, you're there, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and most stores don't close till 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. And, you might have customers there till 10 or 11. You got finance people and sales people that have been there 13, 14 hours, and then they're right back at it the next morning. Like it's real work.
And there's weekends and holidays in there too.
Weekends, holidays. I mean, again, depends on the state. Like Maryland, you got blue laws here. We're not open on Sundays, which is really nice. So you got that day off. But yeah, most holidays, 4th of July, and those you're working, man. You're at the dealership, because it's a sales job, and that's when the sales are happening, right? So the number of people that spend their Christmas Eves in car dealerships and then are right back there on the 22nd, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and those sorts of, I mean, but and again, that's not just the car business, right? There's a lot of people that work on those days. It's not an easy industry, but it can be incredibly rewarding. both personally and financially.
And so after the first, it looks like you went on to a few additional dealerships over your time and were chief operating officer at Jerry's Toyota in Baltimore. I'm curious if there is a customer interaction or a particular sale that sticks with you after all these years, having just been in dealerships and probably seen so many people buy cars. I'm just curious if there's one that comes to mind.
So this could probably sound cheesy, but I sold my father one car in my time because he didn't buy new cars. He kept his cars forever. I will tell you, the first things that come to mind are all the bad transactions, quite frankly. Like, I don't want to tell those stories. All the customers that you're like, man, like, and there were times we fired customers like, yeah, we're just not interested, right? Like, this is not good for us, and we're gonna go ahead and say no to. Those are the first stories that come to my mind. But I remember selling my dad a car, and he's since passed. He's been passed a couple of years, but we made money selling my dad a car. Probably a little bit more money than we would make on an average transaction. And I remember somebody saying to me, like, "You're okay making money selling your dad a car?" I was like, "It's about the service, right? The value is how you feel about the process and the product that you got." My father got the exact vehicle he wanted. He never had to come into the dealership. He never had to deal with like that long wait time and all those sort of things. Like, and we would do that for other customers as well if that's what they wanted, right? We'll deliver the car to you. We'll bring car out to you, like you test drive it from home and that sort of thing. Car dealers are very amenable to customer requests, right? Like, we're in the service industry, right? And so, but for me, he was happy with the price of the car, and he was elated with the service, and that was what it was about, right? And so, no, I didn't feel bad about it at all because he paid for the level of service that he received. So for me, that was trying to get people to understand that, like, price is very rarely the reason why someone buys or doesn't buy a product, especially something that expensive. The average, especially today, right? The average car is probably 45, 50 grand. What's $400 or $500? Like, does $400 or $500 really matter in a $50,000 transaction that you're going to do once every 5 years? Would you not buy a house that you loved? If like the house I live in today, if I said that my wife loved this house and she wanted this house, I was like, yeah, if they don't take another $850 off of this house, I'm not buying it. Really? Would you do that? So that's kind of the perspective. Like, that deal for some reason has always stuck out to me because people just were kind of surprised. I didn't give my father like the greatest deal ever. He got the greatest deal ever because he got exactly what he wanted and he got treated well.
I think that's a great lesson there. And you mentioned some of the negative stories, and I don't want to make you go negative, but I do think it's interesting to explore through the lens of how you helped your team handle it. So if there is a story of firing a customer or a transaction that was particularly difficult, not through my salacious lens, but through the lens of how you had to work through it with your team, I would be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, I think there were times when I think customers just lost their way, and it was never about the deal. It was about the way they talked to people that worked on teams that I got to lead. Now, it was my expectation that we treated everyone with respect, that we negotiated from a position of clarity and we're not being shady. We're not trying to do anything, that's not above board. But it's one of the few transactions in life in this country that we negotiate. I think people lose sight of that too, right? You don't walk into Nordstrom's and negotiate the price of the sports coat, right? Like, it is what it is. Like, you either buy it or you don't. And so people act like they don't like to negotiate, but a lot of people do, right? And when you're negotiating the price of something that, there's no like set, like I can't walk into McDonald's and be like, well, I'll only give you $3 for the Big Mac, right? But a Big Mac in New York City is more than a Big Mac in Baltimore. It's a different price, right? And so vehicles are priced differently. And even new cars that have the exact same equipment in certain markets are different prices, right? Because they're wholesaled differently. So consumers are doing something they don't do that often. And I think at times they lost their perspective on the fact that I'm just another person just like you are. And my sales team or the leaders in the organization, you need to treat us with some level of respect as well. And so that was the situations where I was like, I'm just not willing to do business, right? As a Toyota dealer, I'm required by the Toyota agreement to do warranty work on your vehicle. Past that, I own the car. I do not have to sell it to you for any price. So I'm just not interested in doing business with you because of the way that you've treated the team that works here. Those are and it was never about the deal. It was just, you can't talk to people like that. You're not going to treat my sales staff like that. You're not going to disrespect the people that work here. Right. And those were the stories that, where I was and those were the ones where I would come flying out of my office when I would hear things or, and like, no, we're not having that. Like, no deal is worth that. And I think the team saw that they were, as a leader, they're your number one priority is your team, right? And I'm sure that I make mistakes. I make mistakes today, and there's no doubt, right? We're humans. We're gonna make mistakes. But there's things that you can control and things that you can't always control your situation, but you can control how you react to it. And if my team didn't react to a situation well, I would try to diffuse the situation and then try to coach them through that. And I'm sure there were situations I didn't react well to, but same for a customer. And if we give you that opportunity and you want to continue to be incredibly unpleasant and unprofessional, I'm just not interested.
Absolutely. And so you've led this life now outside of the dealership, within the dealership, but all circling around an intense environment of the industry. I'm curious. So you step into the SaaS world. What made you want to make that transition? Was it a breath of fresh air in some senses?
So I made the transition out of necessity, right? The last place I worked, it didn't work out. I was told one day it was going to be my last day there, and okay. And so luckily, being around the industry as long as I have been, you start to a lot of people, and I knew a lot of people in the vendor world, and reached out to them because I was like, maybe the retail business isn't for me. Like the hours are tough. I had little kids then. I was going through a divorce. Luckily connected with someone that worked at a software company, a CRM company that I loved the CRM. I liked using it. And, he was making a professional change, and he was going to go do something else. And he's like, actually, maybe you could come do this job that I do in this market. And so it just kind of worked out. And that was kind of how I ended up in the SaaS world. And yeah, it was a welcome change. I used to describe it. I still do. It's kind of like having grandkids, right? Like I get to go in and play with the kids. I get to go into the dealerships and interact and be in that world that I love. And then I get to leave it behind. I don't take all of that home at night. And so that was what I loved about it. And especially being an individual contributor for a while, right? I was selling CRM systems and interacting with car dealers who I love, and being able to position the product from a place where I understood what they do all day long. Right. And so, as a general manager, I don't really care how it works behind the scenes. Here's the things that matter to me. Like, does it do this, this, and this? And will this make my people's lives easier? Let me show you how we do those things. Cool. Right. So that was fun. And then, again, through people that I knew, I went through a NADA Academy, a General Managers Academy, while I was at that first dealership on the retail side. And I met a guy named Marco Schnabel, who was working at Mercedes-Benz in Manhattan at that time. And he had started a small startup, which became a big startup, Automotive Mastermind. And he gave me an opportunity to come there. And that was probably the perfect fit for me. That job was not selling. It was servicing dealers who had partnered with Automotive Mastermind. And it was an interactive platform that the sales and management teams leveraged along with some marketing components. And my job was to go in and train the users at the store how to leverage the technology, make phone calls to customers, help them buy their next vehicle, leveraging the technology. And it was like the perfect fit for me, man. Like I got to, again, be in a dealership every day. I got to interact with sales team members and managers and do coaching and training, and then go home at night and not have that level of intense pressure that, man, if we didn't, if tomorrow isn't another good day, there may not be another day.
You had earned maybe a day without a quota by that point, I would say.
Yeah, like a day without a quota is a good day sometimes, right?
Sometimes it allows you to reset.
Yeah.
I've only had one job ever in my life without a quota, and I still worked intensely, but it allowed me to actually just be more forward thinking and think a little bit longer term. I had realized that I actually think some of the quotas I'd had earlier in my life had been too short term in structure, and therefore my thinking in business was a little too short term.
That's a great point. I think it's that job and the roles I had at Mastermind, and then the roles that I have now here at LotLinx really allow you. There's this concept of on the business versus in the business, right? And I think when you're quota carrying as an individual contributor, you're very in the business, right? Like it's just every day. Here's what I'm doing, blah blah blah. And then if you're leading a team that's quota carrying, it can become that as well, right? We're just every day, I'm just trying to, but the problem is that you're just constantly navigating things as you go along, and you're not seeing what's around the corner. And when you have that opportunity to really just spend time on the business, and this another big mentor of mine, Andrew Rains, he still gives me a hard time about this. Like I don't spend enough time on the business. I am too much into the business. And as a leader, you've got to be on the business, because the goal is like, where are we going next? And what are the things that we see that are coming at us so that we can react before it becomes right in front of us? And what are the technologies that we can leverage, and what are the things that we can do differently to, again, make our people more efficient and make their lives better. So it is kind of nice to have some space where you don't feel like I have to be talking to a customer right now because I got to be building pipeline. I got to be closing pipeline.
Yeah. It's interesting that I really like that in the business versus on the business. That's been one of the hardest things about me transitioning into being a founder and being a CEO is sometimes I need to actually like sit down and read a book about what I'm trying to do or read something or go and just try to have one meeting. There's much more strategic work in nature than I was used to. And I developed this bubble of anxiety because I was like, I need to be talking to clients all day, every day. Otherwise, I'm in trouble. So I'm going to steal that in the business on the business, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, and because I stole it, most good things in life are we grab them from other people, right? And I will tell you, it's probably the number one value that like going through like a sales academy or a leadership coach or whatever is that there is so much content out there, right? And so much content available for free today, right? But the resource that none of us have any more of than anyone else is time. And to your point, or you feel this pressure, right? And so I spend a good amount of time going through content and finding resources and learning about it. And that's the value is, hey man, in this 45-minute session, I'm going to keep you fully structured right here. I've already done the research. Like this is a topic you want to talk about. You want to get better here. Cool. Let's talk about this, right? Because that 45 minutes can have a huge impact, but it is really hard because under the surface, you're like, man, I really need to be talking to customers. If I'm not generating pipeline, I'm not growing my business. And it's a struggle. And I feel that way. It's also one of those things you want to feel like you got stuff done today. And thinking, my whole wall right here that you can't see is all whiteboard, right? And it's just standing up with a marker makes me feel more creative and sort of making sure I have that time to go, hey, here's something we're struggling with. What are some of the things, or what do we not really even know we're struggling with yet? What have we not identified that we're struggling with? Or what technologies are out there that can make the teams that we have today more efficient and maybe save us some money?
I love that. So at what point do you start training for triathlons?
Man, I was still in the retail business. I was running car dealerships. And I think when we talked before, I shared with you, I didn't take real good care of myself mentally or physically for a long time. So I put on a lot of weight, drank a lot. Luckily, I've never smoked a cigarette, which is pretty unique in the car business. A lot of smokers in that business. But, I put on a ton of weight and caught myself in the mirror one morning. I was like, wow, like that is not good. So the physical piece of my mistreatment of my body stuck out first, right? The mental piece came along with that, but so I decided I needed to do something to get back into shape. And so like that morning, I was like, all right, cool, man. It's white rice and grilled chicken and iced coffee for the foreseeable future, and just started going to the gym and running here and there. And I'd run a couple blocks, and then I'd run a mile, and then I just got into running and that sort of thing, and started to lose some weight. And unfortunately, I ended up going through a divorce and little kids, and running was something that I could do when I wasn't giving up time to somebody else. I could be up at 4:00 in the morning when everyone else was sleeping, and I could get a workout in, and I could go run. And I traveled for work almost my entire career. You could do it anywhere. So just got really into running, and took a ton of weight off, and met a bunch of other people in that community, and running groups and that sort of thing. And then a lot of those folks are triathletes. And then it was like, hey man, you should come check out this Ironman thing. We're all going to go to this event. So I went to Lake Placid, New York, and watched an Ironman, and went swimming the first day before we got up there like on a Friday. I think the race was on a Sunday. So Friday they were all going swimming, and I was like, yeah, I'll go for the swim with you. And it was like a 1.2 mile lap, right? Because the Ironman is 2.4 mile swim. And so, is that right? Yeah, 2.4 miles. So you go out 1.2 miles and come back, you go out halfway and back. We got to do it twice. And I had never swam a lap in my life. And all I could do was get to that first buoy that was like, 25 meters out there before I was going to drown. But I was not going to not get that 1.2 mile loop done. And so I just went buoy to buoy and struggled my way through it. And it took forever, and went for a 55 or 60 mile bike ride the next day in the mountains in Lake Placid with that group, and was just like, man, this is amazing. And then I watched the race, and I watched people of all sizes, shapes, and women, ages, and they're out there doing an Ironman. I mean, swim 2.5 miles, and then you're going to ride your bike for 120, I think it's like 120 miles. And then you're going to run a marathon. Like, really? All in the same day? Like, all without having lunch? It was wild. And I just fell in love with it, man. I was like, I want to do this. And I signed up for the Ironman the next year while we were there. And that's kind of how I got into it. And it became an addictive thing, man. Like I couldn't wait to get up in the morning to go work out or get on the bike. I did dislike swimming a lot. I think you and I talked about this, right? You're a triathlete and Ironman. Swimming is not my thing. But I loved it, man. That's kind of how it was. And again, I think it was this place that I could be left alone. Like you're out running for 15 miles or you're out running for 20 miles, right? Like just nobody's bothering you. And you just got this peace and this space. And I would say that mental piece of how I wasn't treating myself well and how I wasn't treating other people well, I really learned a lot in those times out on my own, right? Like it's a very lonely place but that's a good lonely for me. Like I could just really think and clear my head and look back on things and be like, man, I wish I'd have handled that differently. Right. So, but I never did any of that during the swims. All I want to do is get it done. Like how many more laps do I have? Right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I love hearing that story because it's so similar to my experience. I needed to kind of flip a switch, and my first inkling was with swimming. I had never swum a lap either, but I was always intrigued. You hear about how good swimming is on your body holistically, less beat up of the joints and so on. And I went once and I met these people and they were doing the same thing. And I went and watched a race and I actually got hooked on the swimming because the swimming for me was very meditative. I'd always struggled to slow my mind and focusing on the breathing, no headphones, no music. But there was many a time we would always train outside here in Texas. And in the winter, the pool was warm, but you'd have to walk to the pool. And I remember in the winter, it'd be 30 some degrees in the morning when you get up and just walking to the pool. And then you have to stand over it and it's heated, but it's, they're cheap. It's heated to like the lowest possible level.
Yeah.
And so I remember just waking up thinking, okay, am I going to be able to make that? But then you would, and you'd have a great exercise and it would be 7 and you'd be like, I already won the day. And it would have so many implications on the rest of your life. You just feel like you could do everything better, more positive, more fun to be around. And so you mentioned like kind of the mental changes that it gave you. Is that when you then decided to start your coaching business as well?
Yeah, no, actually the coaching business is relatively new. And I will say, I got to say you're in Austin, right? So I did at one point swim in that natural pool in Austin.
Yeah, Barton Springs.
Yeah. Until I came down and hit a snake and I was like, yeah, I'm out. I'm like, I'm done. Nope. By the way, I'm out. So anyway, like I mean, I love swimming outside, but not with snakes. But you were doing cold plunges before cold plunges were cool. So I love it. So no, the coaching business kind of came, kind of fast forward. I really went through some mental health issues. Just not a happy person. Just wasn't, and I realized I just wasn't treating people very well. So saw a therapist and worked through some stuff there. And that's a constant struggle. Right. But I also reconnected with my faith. And so just kind of really started getting involved in the church, met my now wife, and she's very, very involved in our church where we go today and always has been. And strangely, I got really ingrained with that church very quickly. It's a large church. I got to know the lead pastor and the teaching pastor and those sorts of things. And I was telling them about what I do, and I do all this leadership coaching. I was building leadership content for the enablement role at Automotive Mastermind. So I had all this content that we were building to help grow our leaders within that organization. And they're like, man, like we're struggling with a lot of stuff here in the church. Would you share some of that content with us? And so I still love the Automotive Mastermind. Like, yeah, man, if you need to spend an hour every other week, at the church doing that, man, go do it, man. That's great. I would go in and meet like 35 people on the staff, so a large group, and we go through this content. And I learned a ton. They seemed to really learn a ton and engaged it. And I said, man, this is something. Somebody was like, man, you should just do this. Like, this is amazing. Like, you're really good at this. You're a good facilitator, but the content is really is great. I was like, I thought about that, and one of the people there was like, but what? Like, why not take that leap of faith? And I was like, easy for you to say. I got 5 kids, and there's a lot of financial reasons why, but that conversation made me. I went home and started talking to my wife about it. And we went on vacation the following week, and we were sitting in Ocean City, Maryland, and she was like, you should do this. Like, maybe not full time, but like, why not? Like, a ton of people and you're passionate about it. And so we sat there that day. We came up with a name. We bought a web address, and we were off to the races. And it's a very, very small. Some people say they have a side hustle. I'd call it a side saunter, right now, I mean, my full-time job is a lot, and I love doing that, but I get to do that coaching in my full-time job, which is great. But so I've got a couple small organizations that I work with here, including the church, and a couple individual clients that, I do some small group work with. But for me, man, it's just, I get to handpick the people I work with, and I learn as much from them as they get to learn from me. And it fills my cup. It puts me, like, it makes me feel really good if everyone's like, man, I took something away from today. And I feel like I'm inspired to go be a better person today based on what we talked about. And that's all leadership is, man. Like, leadership isn't a title. It goes in every direction. And it's, John Maxwell says it's one word, it's influence. It's our ability to influence others. And I've got 5 kids, and I've got community organizations I'm involved with, and got work organizations. And there's an opportunity to be a leader in all of those areas, no matter what your title is. And I talk to my kids about it all the time. I was on the phone with my son last night. He's senior year of high school, his last lacrosse season. Be a leader. Like, your number one job is to lead others, right? Like, show them what to do, and pick them up, encourage them, and show them how to grow, and you will get something from that too, right? And that's when you can watch people around you grow and be better, man. It's incredibly rewarding. So that's how I got into the coaching thing. Was really kind of just one of those weird. Again, you go nowhere by accident. I have a buddy that tells me that all the time. You go, and just happened to be having a conversation with the leadership at the church about what I was building out at my work, and they were like, "Man, we could use that here." And then the next thing you know, it morphs into this, right? So
I love that. All right, and then my last question is, you've got this kind of wave of positivity, I would say, happening at this stage of your life that we talked about. Ironman, getting back into your faith. It sounds like your job is kind of balanced out in a better place, but you get the news that you have a major health scare. Can you take me through that?
Yeah. The Reader's Digest version, man, like, I thought I had an ear infection. I had just this massive pain in the side of my head for weeks. I was going to doctors and dentists. No one could figure out what it was. And finally you could start to see, like, this growth coming out of my neck. And so went and saw an ENT. And as I'm seeing an ENT here in Baltimore, like locally, my wife is on the phone at Johns Hopkins trying to figure out what this is. And I get home. She's like, "You have an appointment tomorrow with this guy at Johns Hopkins." And I walked in, and he's like, "You have HPV cancer." He's like, he's like, "I already know what you have." He's like, "We'll do the biopsy and all that." But he knew right away. Super curable. Couldn't do operation though, because it was on the back of my tongue. Most people would have been happy. I wouldn't have been able to speak if they cut it out. But, my wife would probably be thrilled. But so it just meant, radiation and chemo. And to your point, first of all, I was in good shape. I had my faith, and I had a support system that, both personally and professionally, the people that I was still working at Automotive Mastermind, Marco and Andrew and those guys were like, "Man, whatever you need." And that really took my understanding of how impactful it is to have a great team. The team I had around me there was so incredible. I spent 6 months getting radiation every day. And there were days when I was out of it, man. I was in the hospital twice for 9 days because of the impact that it had. And I was the director of the year that year. And I didn't work anywhere near as hard. But because the team was so good and they were so great, and they saw an opportunity to help lift up each other, right? Man, like, that will never not resonate with me, man. The power of just having the right people around you, right? And I knew that cancer wasn't going to kill me, right? We were going through COVID, so that was a little bit of a challenge, right? But, I knew that the cancer wasn't going to kill me. But the regiment of going through that care was tough, right? It was in my mouth. My whole mouth was burned. I couldn't eat any solid foods for 5 or 6 months. It was all liquid diet and that sort of thing. But I live 15 minutes from one of the best hospitals in the world. And I met so many people that had to fly over and spend money to stay in the area. And like I'm blessed. 15 minutes away, I could come home every day. And I had a wife that would drive me back and forth, and a mother that could pick me up when, she may not be available, and those sorts of things. And kids that were texting me, "Hey, did you get chemo yet today? How you feeling?" Right? Like, man, like, that kind of stuff. My perspective had really changed before that, but there are things that will happen in your life that put a lot of things very much in perspective. And if I still treated people the way I treated them probably 15, 20 years ago today, I don't know that that experience would have been the same. And so for me, it's just one of those things that I know how incredibly lucky I am and how blessed I am to have had a father that was my hero, and to have a support system that I have, and to work in places and with people like I got to work with at Automotive Mastermind and at LotLinx today. Like I've been here a year now, almost next week, and I love it. I love getting to spend time with people that work there. And I wake, maybe it's how do you feel about Monday mornings on Sunday nights? And I love Monday mornings. I can't wait to get to work. I love it because it's because of the people and what we get to do together. So that's kind of where my mindset really shifted many years ago. And cancer just put a stamp on that, man. Like, have better perspective.
Well, that is a tremendous note to end on. Dan, I could talk to you for 3 hours. Thank you so much for joining me, for sharing your story. We'll put a link to your coaching business and LotLinx and all that you're doing in the show notes, and we would love to do this again sometime.
Love it, man. I'd talk to you forever, Kevin. Hey, listen, maybe we'll get together and we'll do some training, as long as it's not swimming.
I'd love that. I look forward to it.
All right, buddy.